guys, today I'm going to answer another question, this time coming from a subscriber. Tom Robertson writes, what was it like transitioning from 6-string to 7-string to 8-string and beyond? For me, the transition from a 6-string instrument to a 7-string instrument wasn't really all that bad. I really was just curious about getting a guitar that had that extra low B string on it, but I didn't want to lose the high E. I didn't want to just tune down a 6. One of the things that kind of helped me adapt to it is that at the time I was really into guitars that had thinner necks, like I was playing a few different Ibanez models at the time. My first 7-string was an LTD MF207, which also had a relatively thinner neck. Not Ibanez RG standards thin, but like still pretty, like it wasn't chunky or anything. So that definitely helped the transition, being able to jump onto a guitar that has a similarly thin neck, and that didn't necessarily cause a hindrance. One of the other things that helped too was that at the time, being that I was playing those Ibanez models, I was playing guitars that already had a 25.5-inch scale length, so going to a 7-string that had the same scale length wasn't necessarily so bad either. And also bear in mind, this was like the late 90s, so really finding 7-strings that had longer scale lengths, or multi-scale for that matter, was just pretty much out of the question at that time. If anything, I felt like I got more pushback from my local guitarist friends, being from Rockford, Illinois, which is not exactly known for being very open-minded. I found this to be the phenomenon that I would tell my friends, hey guys, guess what I just got? I got a 7-string, isn't that cool? And everyone would just kind of give me the, what, do you think you're better than us? Or what, do you suddenly think that you're like this incredible guitar player that is like leaps and bounds above all of us? Why don't you just tune down a 6-string, bro? Why do you have to be so different? Whatever, there's always going to be the people out there that are like, hey dude, all you need is a telly. And whatever, Telly's fine for some people, Strat's fine for some people, Les Paul's fine for some people. It wasn't fine for me. Explore your own path, alright? Anyways, back to the main question at hand. Transitioning necessarily from 6 to 7 wasn't really so bad. When I transitioned to an 8-string, there was a little bit more of a kind of a mental block that I had set for myself. I really hadn't heard much music that had 8 strings on it at that point. I heard some, I thought it was cool. It wasn't really inspiring me or like making me go, oh my god, that's fucking incredible, like I had when I first switched to 7-strings. So when I first picked up a 7, I was exposed to, of course, Korn at the time, Dream Theater, those awesome Morbid Angel albums that had a 7 on it, and of course Meshuggah. So like I had a whole lot to go on at the time. When I was first, seeing various 8-strings pop up, pretty much Meshuggah, and that was kind of it. You really didn't see any other 8-strings necessarily popping up all the time. Like occasionally you maybe would see Dino from Fear Factory play it, but that's it. So yeah, no, I played a few different 8-string models at various guitar stores, and I wasn't really all that impressed. It was one of those things where like, yeah, it's cool, it's a novelty, but I just couldn't get into it. Part of it was that I would pick one up and I wouldn't know what to do with the thing. I think part of that might be that when I first started playing an 8-string, I kind of transitioned from a 6 to an 8 at that point, because just from not having bands that were willing to use a 7-string, I ended up just kind of giving up on owning them at that time. And it had been about maybe like 2 years since I'd had one in the house. At that point, I was probably on like my 5th or 6th band in a row that was using 6 strings tuned to drop C. So it was just like, well, why even have a 7 if I'm not going to be able to use it? Didn't play a 7 for a while, and then kind of jumped from a 6 to an 8. I just kept getting lost in whenever I would try one. And finally at some point I was at some music store while I was on the road with a band. I picked one up and somehow it just clicked. I don't know what other way to describe it, but all of a sudden I just started coming up with stuff right there on the spot. I wasn't getting lost. I was figuring out where I was at you know, being able to jump from like 6-string parts down to the low strings and integrate that into riffs, and all of a sudden it just gelled with me. There were definitely some issues going from what I was used to an 8-string though, because that was a substantially bigger scale length. I basically was going from like round about 25-inch scale lengths to 27 all of a sudden. It wasn't something I was used to, it wasn't something I was prepared for. At the moment when I first started doing it, you know, there was a little bit of discomfort. I found myself having to do more stretches and more exercises to kind of get my fingers limbered up and being able to play it. And also I didn't really like the string tensions that straight scale 8 strings were providing. You know, I felt it was too tight on the treble strings. I felt it was way too loose on the bass strings. So that led me to eventually get a multi-scale with, but that's for another video. And then as far as like how I recently got a 10-string, that was kind of more of the same. When I first got it, when I first picked it up, I honestly, because I jumped the 9-string, I didn't, that was what I really wanted, but the option came up to just have a 10-string all of a sudden. I was like, oh, well, hell, I'll just go for it and see what happens. I really enjoyed it, but it was kind of more of the same. It was like such a difference in scale lengths. Even multi-scale, being that agile is a 27-inch on the treble side to a 30-inch on the bass side, it really takes some serious stretching, you know, wrist exercises, finger exercises to get up to snuff in order to play that sucker. It's definitely not an instrument that's for the faint of heart. It's much heavier. The neck is super wide. So like if you're like me, like you're one of those players that loves to wrap his thumb around the neck a little bit as he's playing, well, tough. You can't do it on this instrument. It's that wide. That being said, you know, I still find it enjoyable. Probably the biggest thing that I can tell anybody that is thinking about going from a traditional 6-string instrument to something that's extended range, that is to say 7-string, 8-string, 9-string, 10-string, whatever. The main thing that you have to keep in mind is you need to stay curious about it, and you need to stay open for experimentation. You need to be wanting that inspiration to hit. If you're picking the thing up, like just kind of to dick around on it, it's not really going to go anywhere for you. You know, you kind of have to put it out of your mind that this instrument is a gimmicky instrument, or that you're not at a level that is good enough to be playing on an instrument like this. You know, don't get me wrong, it's great to have your heroes. I mean, I really want a nice 9-string, and part of the reason for that is because I think Mike Gianelli's music is so freaking good. Same thing with the 7-string, you know, it was because I kept hearing Trey Atzikoth or Frederick Thorndahl that would just make this impressive, dark, brutal music on 7-string, so I had to have one. You know, it's kind of the same thing with like now going into 9-string and beyond. It's cool to have your heroes, but don't think for even a second that you have to be at that same level in order to play instruments like this. What you need to have though is you need to kind of get an idea in your mind of what you want to accomplish on these instruments. I'll give you a for instance. When I started playing 8 strings, I noticed that I had this extra octave that I could kind of play with in the context of chords. One of the things I also kind of figured out early on, because I love to play in minor keys, and I also prefer playing in standard tunings. I would notice that if I have my 8-string set up to standard, I was playing in minor, then the open D chord shape would be essentially the 6th chord in a minor scale if I was just playing like F sharp standard or something like that. I was like, wow, that's kind of convenient that it ends up like that. So there'll like be these times where I'm writing riffs here or there on an 8-string, and I'm riding that low 8th string for all it's worth, and then every so often I'll just hit an open D chord just because it sounds weird and it kind of throws the listener off a little bit. You know, it's kind of cool to come up with riffs on a 6-string or more traditional instrument and then kind of transpose them and rework them and deconstruct them and reconstruct them for extended range instruments using the various octaves that you have at your disposal. I love being able to say, okay, on the 6th string I'm playing it this particular chord just the very next octave up, but now I can move it up a 2nd octave, and whoa, it sounds even better because it's just all over the place. It makes it more interesting to me. It makes it a little bit busier and there's a lot more going on. Would I say that you would feel the same way? No, but that's what I get out of it. In that respect, the extended range instrument inspires me. That's why I keep picking it up, and that's also, I think, why it was a little bit easier for me to overcome any sort of obstacles or sort of mental objections to owning and playing these guitars. So thank you to Tom and the other YouTubers and Facebookers who presented kind of a similar question to me. I hope that I answered your question, maybe gave you some insight, maybe even something that you hadn't thought of before. That would be awesome. If you have any more questions, comments, concerns for me, something maybe you'd like me to answer in another video, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, like and subscribe, and let me give a couple of shout outs real quick. First of all, this awesome beer that I've been drinking, because a lot of people have been asking what beers am I drinking in the videos, so I'm just going to start telling you guys. Unbiased beer review. This is from Breakside Brewery. It is the limited edition Bellwether, which is a sour double wit, which is to say it's a wheat beer, and this one is aged in gin barrels with lime leaves. Ooh, so good. Lately, I've had really good luck with the sours I've been drinking, that they've been kind of subtly sour, not super strong, and I've also found that I've been absolutely loving beers that are barrel aged. It just brings out a more rich, complex flavor, which I love. This particular beer, for lack of a better way of describing it, I'm gonna use the way that my wife described it. She said it tasted like you're drinking perfume. Not like drinking the nasty thing that is perfume, but like just like how perfume smells, that's how this tastes. Very rich, very complex, a little sweet, a little sour, and all in all enjoyable. The final shout out I'm gonna give is to this band that's on this shirt that I'm wearing. I got this shirt at this band's debut show, which was this last Friday, December 16th at Slim's in San Francisco. The name of the band is Dress the Dead. It's a buddy of mine's band, and it's also this really cool kind of coming together of all these guys that have been in various thrash bands over the years. You've got Peter Dalveen, the former singer of The Haunted. You've got Craig Losacero, who has played guitar for Forbidden, Man Made God, Spiral Arms, and even did a stint with Death for a while. You've also got Mark Hernandez, the awesome drummer that was behind the Bay Area thrash band Defiance, as well as you've got Dan DeLay and you've got James Walker in there too. This band is super cool. It's something that's different from what I usually get into, but it's so unapologetically rock, I can't help but enjoy it a lot. It's a little thrashy, a little stoner, and a little kind of Soundgarden-y kind of grunge stuff, but super just high energy, driving rock and roll. I love it. Fantastic. I would highly recommend you guys check them out. They just put out a song on YouTube. It's called 1969. That is just killer. Their debut EP is gonna come out soon. It is recorded by Rob Flynn from Machine Head. He sat in the producer's chair for it, so I would highly recommend you check these guys out. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you've got any other questions, comments, concerns, hey, let me know. Until then, see you next video.